All right, just while we're waiting for the room to populate, we have some up and coming webinars. We've got one on the 19th of November at 10:30, which will be discussing the principles of passive house design with the amazing Shay Taylor from Team Green Architects. And then the last webinar for the year will be in the 3rd of December, again at 10:30. It'll be a bit of a behind the scenes tour of Nuralite. So I'm just gonna walk through the facility and show you guys around a bit. All right, looks like there's a few people joined, that's great. Kia ora tēnā koutou, my name's Shane Clark, General Manager here at Nuralite. Welcome to webinar 13. Hopefully it's lucky for some of us. Today's webinar is around the product Nurajack and how we solve design challenges with floated decks. Now, I'm very happy to be here with Lewis Olding, the product manager for Nurajacks, and behind the scenes doing the magic, we've got producer Jade, who will be running all the wonderful things for us. Right, and for those of you who aren't aware, every time we run these webinars, we make a donation of $10 per attendee to a chosen charity. And we're pleased to announce today that our charity is Diabetes New Zealand. So thanks to all of you that have joined us this morning. You've already made the world a better place. Feel really good about it. All right. Right. So what we're going to do is we recorded this, no we didn't, we practiced this yesterday and we got it down to about 45, 50 minutes, even after we eliminated all the dad jokes. So our first poll today, because we wanted to cover 6 topics, we're not going to be able to. So our first poll today is we're actually going to throw it out to you guys. We want this to be interactive, otherwise you'd be watching my head talk at you for half an hour. So please, we're going to throw up the first poll, and out of the 6 topics, feel free to pick your favourites there. We're going to talk in detail to 3 of these points. So by all means, get interactive and fill in the poll. And also throughout the webinar, I do encourage you to fill in the Q&A forms and ask us any questions that come up. Hopefully towards the end there, we'll have time for some questions. We're just watching that poll come in now. Right, who are our winners? We got...
looks like we've got drainage,
yep,
edge detailing,
yep,
and wind uplift.
Perfect. All right.
Cool.
Excellent. Thanks for that. I'm not sure that's going to go for the order of our presentation, but let's get into it. All right, I'm going to throw you over to Lewis Olding, like I said, product manager for Nuralite. He's been here for a fair while now and doing this thing with Nurajacks. So over to you, Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. As met many before, been doing this for about 9 years for Nuralite, just focused on Nurajacks and providing the Nurajacks as a solution for floated decks. Many of you will be familiar with what a Nurajack looks like. That's one there. And we see it has a self-leveling head, has a rubberized component on the head for tiles, or is available with a joist head for timber decks. It has a very large base. We can support 1,000 kgs of weight on the jack. It distributes that load over a membrane, guaranteed not to damage a sheet-based membrane. Screw adjustable, available in heights from 28 millimeters all the way up to 550 millimeters. If you'd like to know more about the basics of a Nurajack and the Nurajack system, we have 2 webinars that we've already done, available on nurajack.co.nz/webinars.
We can chuck that link up in the chat function there so you guys can see that.
Great. So we're not really going to focus in on what the Nurajack, the different features of the Nurajack today. We're going to focus in on those topics. So the first topic was drainage, wasn't it?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll just flick through the drainage. Okay.
Sorry, Lewis, just before we kick into that, can we just touch on why we have a Nurajack? Why, despite an aesthetic advantage, how did it come about? Why do we have them?
So in 2006, E2AS1 came about, and in that it said that tiles or timber decking needs to be raised and removable above a membrane deck.
Right.
And so that's where the pedestals had already been released by then, of course. But that's where pedestals started gaining a fair bit of traction in the market. So it has a couple of benefits. One, it keeps the trafficable surface above the membrane, so it limits any damage that could be caused to the membrane. It allows water to flow to outlets, and that's what we're going to discuss in a minute. And the reason for that is during the 90s and the great leaky home era that we had here in New Zealand, we saw a lot of the temperature differential between the building and the tile. The tile would heat up and expand and contract at a different rate to the building, causing movement and potential fracture of membrane. Apparently, 30% of all leaky homes started with the leaks in the decks. And so you can see why the decision was made to mitigate those problems that they were having, and creating a raised, removable trafficable surface was really the way to do that.
Right.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now we run, obviously the first topic people have decided on was drainage. So what we're seeing here in this technical drawing is a 2-layer Nuralite torch applied system to a concrete balcony. We're using a clamp type outlet here, which I think this is a really important aspect of the build-up. It's a very important area that needs secure fixing, and the clamp type outlet provides this. And typically with a concrete deck, we're seeing falls created in the concrete to sort of the essential point.
Yeah. And
you've got your magical equipment above that there, Lewis.
So where we see using this sort of outlet is really beneficial, particularly in concrete structures rather than plywood structures. People were doing it definitely with plywood structure, but the ease of buildability in concrete, you can have everything falling to a central point, where if you were to do it in plywood structure, of course, creating that plywood fall in multiple directions slows down the building process and the buildability.
Mm-hmm.
So we see this mostly on commercial projects with concrete decks, concrete construction. Now, Shane, what about outlets with regards to this? Does this need to have an outlet? An overflow?
Yeah, it's always a good idea to have an additional redundancy there for your water to escape should this potential for this to block up. There's a couple of ways of doing this. We also have clamp type overflows, which are very similar in construction to the detail you see here. Otherwise, we can side exit through the likes of scuppers, etc., things like that.
Cool. Well, I hope that covers off that okay. Got a couple of other drawings here just showing more for a plywood structure what we find as being probably easier construction.
Yeah, easier to build, that's for sure, yeah. With a scupper to a rain head, yeah.
So do you want to take us through that, Shane?
Yeah, so we, part of the Nuralite system is we actually provide pre-manufactured scuppers out of aluminium or stainless, depending on your needs. Yeah. And that ties in very nicely to the membrane system. And then again, we have the jacks floating the wear surface above the membrane.
So with regards to the installation of the scupper, is that done by the waterproofer or by the builder? What do they have to do? Do they have to check it out a little bit to be able to get it sitting down flush and that sort of thing? Yeah,
so it is a good idea to rebate the plywood or timber substrate prior to the scupper going in. That way we've got obviously a downhill fall all the way out for the water.
Unimpeded. Yeah. So we can picture in this scenario here, it's a linear fall going from maybe a door threshold out to this the wall junction and then out through a scupper into the rain head here. Just a couple of things to note with regards to, and we'll touch on this with when we go into edge detailing here. We have I can't highlight it sadly but we have a 12mm gap that's required around the perimeter of the tile. And that allows water to flow down the vertical surface, whether it be the cladding or what it might be there, and allow water to flow directly onto the membrane unimpeded. So that 12mm gap has to be maintained, whether it's with a tile or with a timber deck. And that's detailed on our drawings there. Another thing you'll note is that the base of the jack is actually cut down in our drawings, and it's also shown that it's cut down in our in real life too. On the base of the jack, we have some cut lines. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see them very clearly, but they run down here, and that enables you to move the head of the jack right up against the edge of the wall and to minimize any cantilevering of the tile if people were to ever step on that very edge there. So it's good to show that in the drawing, so it's followed through by the installers and when they're installing.
Right.
We've got another drawing here showing a gutter, Shane.
It's like an internal gutter situation.
Yeah,
right.
So what are the benefits of having an internal gutter? Do we need it?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing a lot more designs of late that are actually eliminating the gutter. The gutter's great, of course, because it gets rid of a large volume of water, but it is something that the builder has to construct. and that to construct the correct falls into it. So we're seeing less and less of them, but obviously they do have their place. And obviously, you know, that the change in plane into the internal gutter is not an issue if you've got the Nurajacks solution over the top.
That's right. So a little trap that we sometimes come across with gutters and Nurajacks is that sometimes you'll see the gutters maybe 100 mil in from the parapet. Then that leaves no room to be able to place a Nurajack. Nurajack needs about 100 mil to be able to sit there comfortably, to be honest. So, but sometimes we see like a 50 mil gap, and that means we can't move the head of the jack right across the edge of the parapet. And that means you potentially get cantilevering of tiles. We get asked quite a bit, can we put Nurajacks into the gutters? This drawing here shows a gutter of being about 300 millimeters wide. We can again cut the bases of the jack down both sides of the jack to allow more water flow, and that we're very happy with that, to allow water to flow past the Nurajack, and certainly acceptable to be able to do that. There's another reason why we go for a wider gutter, Shane. Yeah,
sort of the 300 sort of become the industry standard for the minimum width of a gutter. It allows the installer the actual physical space to install the membrane, and with big hands, it becomes a bit of an issue when it's a bit smaller than 300. So that's sort of become the industry norm, really.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's have a look at one more scenario, and that's when going into a drip edge. We've got a really good detail that we've been promoting for quite some time. Can we just digress a little bit into balustrades there, Shane? So are we seeing people top fix balustrades? That was used a lot in the past.
Yes, I mean, back in the dim dark days when Lewis was talking about the change of into the building code with leaky homes, what we did see a lot of then was top fixed balcony posts, etc., which were obviously problematic. So this particular detail here is a really elegant way to solve that potential issue with top fixing. Obviously, we're side fixing. We're not even penetrating the membrane in this instance here. So this Unifix bracket is quite elegant. It also incorporates the what do you call it? The gutter. Yeah. The spouting.
Yeah. So if you follow the red line, that's our base sheet of membrane, and the blue line is the top cap sheet. You see it goes down into just an aluminium angle, which acts as a drip edge, and then then the water will flow into its gutter there. A couple of things to note. You know, we see in the bracket, integrated into the bracket is basically a post for the balustrade. That's all provided by Unix. Something to note here, though, you'll see there that we've got the selected handrail post, the toughened glass, and see it extends down past the blue line of the membrane. The reason we do that for two reasons. First and foremost, to protect against wind uplift. We have the potential of, if you leave that exposed, and the wind can get under the system and potentially uplift tiles. Also, you need to be able to restrain the tile from wanting to walk off the deck. Remember, it's a floated system. There's no glue or grout in the system, so a tile could potentially walk off the deck. So we need to have a protection from that happening. And so by running the glass right down to in line with the bottom of the membrane there, protects against those things.
Right.
Some people go, well, how do we stop people looking up and under the deck and seeing the jacks there? And I'd rather people see the jacks.
I think they look amazing.
Oh, I do too. But a simple solution is just to frost the glass here with a bit of frosting tape from a glass supplier. So.
And this instance here, whereabouts is your cladding space? Is it sit against the glass or more against the post?
So we can, some balustrade suppliers allow a tile cladding spacer to reach against to touch the glass. Others will require an aluminium angle to run along between the posts that you can then support that off the glass. And to be honest, it's probably the more elegant way to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
We've got another one here there, Shane.
Oh, right.
So this is another drip edge. And I'd better to actually look at the photo on this if we could. So we see here that this is a set of stairs leading up onto membrane deck. And how do you restrain those tiles from wanting to walk off the deck again and yet still maintain buildability and those sorts of things? Well, if we go back to our drawing here, again, showing a drip edge and then affixing through the drip edge with a spacer to support that 3 or 4 millimeter aluminium or steel, just to stop, again, that tile from wanting to walk off the deck. So whenever you're designing with tiles in mind for floated tile decks, just keep in mind that they need to be restrained on all 4 edges so that they won't walk away from each other. And if you're struggling in that area, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll walk you through some options.
Yeah, so like as you mentioned, the jack itself can support 1,000 kilos downwards force, but it needs constraining for lateral stability.
Yeah, and just of the tiles on top. The jacks are very stable themselves, just the tiles on top.
Right.
Of course, with a timber deck, less issue, more weight on a timber deck, and the timber is holding it, holds the whole system together, and we can always affix the timber back through to the structure of the building if necessary.
You got a cladding tile spacer in there?
We do.
Not much to see, but that's what they look like.
Yep. So that's a 14mm tile cladding spacer made of a silicon rubber. They're compressed down to 12mm, which is to the building code requirement. Also available in other sizes, 5, 10, and 22mm. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. So what was the next?
There was drainage.
Edge detailing. Well,
edge
that leads quite nicely into edge detailing. Creating stairs. Edge detailing. So again, this is the tile cladding spacer. I'll zoom in on that again. So that's how the tile cladding spacer attaches to a tile. We also have a system for timber decks. It's called a cladding clip. And what that does, it's screwed to the joist of the timber, and it gives you again that 12mm gap, so that the deck won't move into and block up that 12mm gap. So that's also available. You need to look at that on our website or on our brochure. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a tile cladding spacer. It's a rubber grommet that's adhered to the tile. 2 per each tile around the perimeter, just to stop them from moving. And in this illustration here, you'll see, I don't know if you can see it, but in the bottom left-hand corner, there's one there.
Okay.
But the reason why I'm showing that photo isn't for tile cladding spaces.
No. So how do we get the jacks so close to the edge to provide that support?
Well, so traditionally, as I already mentioned, we can cut the base of the jack down, and that moves the head right over to the edge. Okay, and that's quite important to show that in your drawings if you can. But what we're showing here is where the biggest challenge that we face with floated tile systems in particular is when the decks aren't square, they're curved, or they have a bit of an unusual shape, or maybe maybe because they've come around a corner and the building's not square, it's going off on an angle. What you end up getting is very small cut tiles. Now, the smallest cut of tile that a Nurajack can support is around about 150mm. Okay, and so if we're cutting tile smaller than that, we have to come up with other solutions.
Right.
So we come across this from time to time, especially in larger projects where you've got multiple decked areas. And so the way we do that is in the next slide here. We have I'll go into this one here first. You can see this using an aluminium angle, which is affixed through to the upstand, whether it be a parapet or a wall. And whether it's concrete or timber, with a spacer, whether it be a neoprene spacer or something to allow water to flow past, then it's an aluminium angle that supports that tile on that edge. That means we can support smaller cut tiles. We only need one jack in that area rather than trying to get all the jacks jiggled around that area. We can support tiles on curves very easily. And so we've got an example of this here in this project here. It's not the most good looking of images, but you'll see in this image here we have a drainage point right up against the wall where we normally would put put a jack to support a 600 by tile. Instead, we've installed using that technique of an aluminium angle, 2 aluminium angles. You'll notice there's some rubber shims put on top. That's just to stop any noise between the aluminium and the tile. And then you put the jacks as close as you can to that area, and then that supports the tile in that area. People can walk on that more, and it won't cause them any issues. So that's quite an important thing just to keep in mind if you've got decks that are of different unusual shapes.
Right. So you've got a lot of flexibility there with the system. And you've mentioned, I mean, we're talking about the Nurajack, which is one product, but you've also mentioned many accessories. Obviously, we carry all those. We've got all those. So all the pieces to make the puzzle.
Nurajack is the largest supplier of pedestals in the New Zealand market, with most specified as well. According to Master Spec, we're at about 64% of specifications is Nurajack, and we're very proud about that. But it comes with that we need to actually have the stock here for the projects that come about. And we have everything from acoustic pads, which we'll talk about in a future webinar about the acoustics. our tile cladding spaces. We have the different heads that are available for the jacks. And other things that we've worked out over time, like wedges to extend the ability to level, so 5-degree wedges and so forth, because the head of the jack can, of course, can self-level for 5%, but then an additional wedge that gives us more leveling ability.
Lots of solutions there. All right, we're on to our last topic for this morning so far.
Oh, we're flying.
I know, we're doing great. This was voted. I'm not sure if you guys saw the poll results, but this was by far one of the highest voted for topics. So we've seen that through a lot of questions we get back through here at the Nuralite office. It's very topical. So we'll talk to you about our solutions for wind uplift.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we need to acknowledge that it hasn't really been an issue here in New Zealand. From a Nuralite's point of view, we've seen scenarios where people haven't protected from wind uplift under the tile through, as we've already talked about, from a balustrade point of view. And yes, of course, that's going to cause a bit of wind uplift there. But in a traditional style with a parapet, what we see on apartment buildings and that sort of thing in New Zealand, we haven't had a single issue of wind uplift in New Zealand with Nurajacks. However, offshore, there has been, and here's an illustration. This isn't New Zealand, I need to make that very clear. This was from Hurricane Katrina, so in New Orleans. And what we can see in this illustration here is we've seen that the wind, this red arrow here, has come along and along a rooftop paving type scenario. What's actually happening here is the wind actually comes along the building, then travels up the building, and as it comes across this edge, the vortices start happening, and that unsettles the pavers, and then they start lifting. Now, this was a Category 5 hurricane that caused this. And what we do differently in New Zealand compared to the States, they use a lot of pavers for roof ballast or to protect from UV, and we don't tend to see that so much here in New Zealand. But interestingly, in this project here, the balconies weren't as affected, of course, as the rooftop, because the balconies build up with pressure, so no extra wind can blow in through there, and they're less affected, of course, than what the rooftop would be. And so we're talking in extreme environments, extreme hurricane force winds, where this can be an issue. And I suppose the question is, how do we come up with a solution?
Yeah, how do we solve this potential issue? I mean, in Auckland, well, in many cities, the buildings are getting bigger, they're getting taller, we're building more of them. So it goes without saying that at some point we're going to have to solve this potential issue.
Yeah,
so.
That's right. Well, let's have a look. I've got three solutions that we're going to really focus in on, and to help us understand how we can achieve this. The first one is our windproof version 1, because it was the first system that was released probably about five or 6 years ago. So the Nurajacks are made in Italy by a company called Eterno Ivica. We rebadged them as Nurajack here in New Zealand, and we're the exclusive distributor for New Zealand and the South Pacific. The Nurajack comes as standard. In the center of the jack, it can receive a self-tapping threaded screw, a stainless steel screw. And you can see that's what they've done here in this illustration, using a washer and a screw to affix the tile down to the top of the jack. And that there, of course, creates a level plane of pavers. There's no need to glue the base of the jack down. Without gluing the base of the jack down, we can achieve 2,166 newtons of upward force. Pressure, so that's equivalent of wind speeds of about 212, 220 kilometers an hour. Now, just to give that bit of perspective, we had a truck blow off the Harbour Bridge here in Auckland at 120 kilometers an hour. So the wind, the protection from wind uplift is huge and far above what we'd expect to receive here in New Zealand, especially in city environments and residential environments where we're building residentially.
Yeah, so we're not suggesting we put jacks on the Harbour Bridge, but we do have a version 1, which is a rather industrial patina to it.
I call it tactile.
Tactile.
It's and this is actually at the Hilton Hotel here in Auckland. The wind engineer decided that there needs to be a bit more protection against wind uplift. Interestingly, just after this was installed, they had that tornado go through and it took out the top end of the cloud building.
Yes.
We didn't lose a single tile in any of the buildings around there, but especially not this building, which was a direct hit too. So as Shane's mentioned, quite a tactile look, and needless to say that version 1 has been improved upon. So I'd like to show you version 2. So version 2 is a clip system that clips the tile down to the top of the jack using these removable clips. You can see that the tile is actually milled 10 mil above the base of the tile, and then it's held in place. We've got a little video which I'm going to actually click through it because we're going to run out of time otherwise. We can see here that the tiles are milled, as I said, about 10 mil above the base of the tile, and then these clips just simply slide into place. Now this system can achieve the same uplift protection as what the previous system, so about 2,166 newtons, or wind speeds up to 220 kilometers an hour. And we see here that once they're clipped in place, the whole system is protected very
locked together
nicely.
right.
Also around the perimeter, we have what's called an easy stop skirting that protects the edges from wanting to uplift. And that also can act as a termination bar for our membrane. It's a very elegant way of doing it, and it looks good once it's installed. So importantly also, once you've got the system installed, you can it's still raised and removable. You can slide the clips backwards and forwards to be able to remove the tile as necessary.
And inspect and maintain and clean your drains like you should.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's really the windproof version 2.
Right.
And then finally, we have Outdoor, who many of you are familiar with Outdoor, the aluminium frame system. We work very closely with Outdoor, and they use a system of ours called a fixing plate.
Sure, mate. So the Nuralite fixing plate is a little bit different to the last 2 versions you've seen. We're actually penetrating the fixing through to the structure now with this fixing plate. So the fixing plate is actually pre-manufactured in a factory in controlled conditions. We're able to install the membrane skirt and guarantee its waterproofness without having to any of the effects that we have on site, wind and phreatitis and all that kind of things. So this fixing plate is then fixed to the structure, which then provides, I guess, a stainless steel post, which you're free then to fix whatever you feel like fixing to. It could be a TV aerial, could be a solar panel array, but in this case here, it is the Outdoor decking rail.
Yeah, so how much uplift support does that individual fixing plate achieve?
We can achieve up to 5 kPa per fixing plate. So obviously if you need a higher rating, we just add more plates to the system.
Yep, okay. And so you can see here from Outdoor, what Outdoor are doing. They are putting their aluminium frame system, fixing it to the top of the fixing plate. That's the fixing plate lug there. And then of course having their timber tile or whatever solution on top of that. A very robust solution, can also act as a rain screen over top of buildings and things like that. So there's plenty of other applications, and they incorporate the Nurajack as part of the system to be able to support any flexure of that joist. So a really good system, something that we're quite happy to be a part of. I think we're actually going to run out a bit of time here, so I'm just going to run through these couple of projects. You've probably seen Grace Apartments. So Nurajacks are all over Grace Apartments with on the balconies, some interesting curves that had to be detailed too, and then on the rooftop was Outdoor's frame system with the composite decking, and then here's an example of a stair detail which we'll talk about at a future presentation because we're going to deal with stairs then. And then finally, this is the Heritage Hotel. Heritage Hotel had a leaking rooftop for many years. It's the old farmers building in Auckland here, of course. Nuralite was specified by the architect. We ran the membrane right in under the swimming pool, where the swimming pool sat on top. Fiberglass swimming pool sat on top of the Nuralite membrane. Interestingly, extremely high wind zone, hasn't had a single issue of wind uplift, and it's just using a standard tiles on standard Nurajacks. So people are always impressed that they don't realise they're running on a 100mm cavity when they're running and diving into the pool. So a couple of good projects. If you'd like to know more, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, right. By my count, we've got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to throw some questions. We've had some really good questions come in from the floor, so flick through some more. Even if we don't get a chance to answer all your questions today, we'll send out this webinar, this recording, along with all the Q&A session as a Word document. One question here from an anonymous attendee: do you have a fire-rated jack?
We certainly do. It's called like windproof. It's now fireproof, and but it is made of a different type of plastic, and it has a fire rating. I can't recall the fire rating off the top of my head, but I can send that detail through if you contact me.
Cool. One here: can you use the Nurajacks system on the warm roof, on the Nuralite warm roof?
Absolutely. So the warm roof, the insulated board that Nuralite uses has a higher standard KPA ability, compressive ability, than what other insulated boards are. So we don't even need a cover board. We can just place the Nurajack, and each Nurajack can withstand, in that scenario, 600 kg per jack.
Good. A question here that comes back to when we were talking about the scupper detail. This is for me, I think. They're talking about the rebate of the scupper. So they're asking what depth we should rebate it. So we're looking for about a 3mm rebate that'll allow the membrane to dress nicely over the flange that's welded to the scupper. One here: can we use Nurajacks on an internal floating floor?
But we have done, and it works really well. Especially, we had a recent project in Sales Street, actually, where they took a six-story building and made it 8 stories, but the rooftop, of course, had a pitch on it. And so they used Nurajacks and a plywood structure to create a floor. And they were actually really impressed with how stable it was. Once it all went down, it felt like just a solid floor, and so it should. You know? Yeah. So yeah, we've certainly done that, and on numerous projects.
Excellent. All right. Oh, well, we'll leave a couple other questions there. We'll come back to you in the Word format. Now, so we just obviously talked about the Nurajacks today, how we keep them off the membrane, and the issues that did create before we had them separated. Obviously, we've got all the technical nous and the stock and the know-how to help you solve those design challenges. I think we've got another poll to send out. Hopefully the instructions are in it. Just rate our presentation today. Should we keep doing these, or should we stick to our day job? Good to get your feedback on that. As I mentioned, we've got some up and coming webinars, one next week, the principles of passive house design. And then the last one for the year will be a bit of a run around the Nuralite warehouse, which will be interesting. And then the last poll before I leave you will be, would you like a follow-up? So actually a couple of the questions that came in were quite specific around detailing. We'd be more than happy to get back to you. Obviously it's specific to something that's quite unique. So that's probably your opportunity there. Myself, Lewis, or the team will be in touch. So feel free to fill in that form. All right. Thank you to my panelists, Lewis. Thank you, producer Jade. Thanks for viewing today, and thanks for your donations, folks, to Diabetes New Zealand. It's been good to see you all. And we'll see you for webinar 14 next week. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.